So anyway, let's talk about your new record, "The Land That Time Forgot." And my understanding is some of it was recorded in upstate New York. Whereabouts was that?
Catskill, the city of Catskill.
Oh, okay.
And it was, let me see here. Make sure I got some juice here. Okay. Yeah, I started the record in San Francisco. I kind of hit the wall, for a number of reasons. One of the reasons was that, the economy is so white hot here.
Right.
It was difficult for musicians to schedule. Everybody's got 5 jobs, and
man,
something's got to give. But that's the whole nother podcast. So
that's true.
So I ended up in upstate and in a studio there in Catskill that was built in a like a 5-bedroom colonial mansion, and
right.
And I stayed there, and I slept there, and I played the piano in the morning in my socks, and I there was one main street, and so I don't know, I kind of quieted down and was able to get the songs to start behaving, get out of my rut.
Cool. So the songs themselves, when did you start writing this batch, and what's the background behind them?
Well, it's very much a record of its time, I think it's definitely a reflection of the times that we live in. They were written over the last couple of years, I suppose. It doesn't mean that we didn't, it doesn't mean that I tried to get Nixon off the ground, 3 years ago or 4 years ago. I don't really remember, but, it's, it just became more and more urgent, and things started getting finished, and, that's the way it goes.
Yeah. So did the record come out in May or in August?
Came out in August. It snuck out in May because we had originally taken pre-orders for May, but when the hammer fell on the pandemic and the city fathers said we couldn't play or tour, then we didn't know. We just kind of reacted and grabbed another release date, and I kind of let the people that know about that stuff make those decisions. But I was worried that the people who pre-ordered it would feel burned if they had to wait, so we just went ahead and sent it to them in May. So,
Yeah. And so how is the...
No harm, no foul.
So it's been out officially for about a month now, almost. Have you gotten much feedback from folks, fans, other musicians, anybody?
I think every once in a while a record comes along that connects with people. I don't know what that is. I don't know what makes people return to it. I don't know what it is that I did especially. I think it's connected with a lot of people. I think a lot of people are at home right now.
Yep.
But having been down this road before, I do feel like there's something about this record that has connected with people. And, generally people are in a good mood. I mean, the labels, what I mean is the people on my team, the label's in a good mood. You got to feel sorry for these guys trying to run a record label in 2020 or wherever we are, and you got to kind of feel sorry for them, So
absolutely.
I mean, I'd like to be able to go out there and do the hand-to-hand combat and take the record to the people, but I've kind of been hobbled a little bit, and yet it's been doing well enough for the company to have realistic expectations, and it feels good.
Right. Now you mentioned that for some reason this album seems to be connecting with people, and I know for myself, as soon as I heard "High as Johnny Thunders," I was in, because I'm an old punk rocker of a certain age. I saw the Dolls, I saw the Heartbreakers, all that stuff, and in fact, Johnny, I think, made some of his last recordings with some of the Chesterfield Kings, if I'm not mistaken. So,
well, I mean, the song was originally about air travel. It was about, if I was 35,000 feet, if I had a window seat, originally we said I'd be fucking John Travolta.
Yeah.
And so that was the song, fucking John Travolta. And one day I realized that, this is Johnny's song. We just haven't figured it out yet,
Yeah.
And I mean, I love Johnny Thunders. I love listening to his music. I think he's a character. I don't think he ever took a bad photograph. I mean, to me, he's sort of like Chuck Berry in the sense that he was the whole package.
Yeah.
What do we really know about Johnny Thunders? You know, I mean, he had style. He had the sort of the instincts of a svelte cheetah. You know, he had a kind of an original sound that was a kind of a weird vibrato that was kind of wide, and you can hear it from the first New York Dolls track all the way to his dying day. You know,
Yeah.
so he had a sound. He had songs. He had style. And he was the whole package, you know, like Chuck Berry or Jimmy Rogers or whatever. So, yeah, I mean, he's my hero.
And did your paths ever cross back in the day?
And that's another thing is that I never saw Johnny Thunders. I mean, I can throw a rock from where I live right now, and I can hit a couple places that he played.
Right.
But for one reason or another, you know, I didn't get it together. No, not even a festival or anything, you know. But all the years, especially in the mid 80s when I was a kid, you know, touring in Europe with Green on Red, you know, we always heard a lot about Johnny.
Yeah, I'm sure you did.
Yeah. You know.
He was an enigma.
Yeah, I mean, we would load in, we would load into a gig in Frankfurt or Stockholm, and somebody would say, "Oh yeah, he's actually a father to child with that bartender back there."
Right.
You know,
Oh man.
you know. So
That's
he was
leaving
kind of
a legacy, I guess.
Yeah, he was kind of a hero to me. He's fearless.
Yep. Now, another song that I was hoping to touch on was Willie and Nilly. I mean, it's a great little piece of just setting up a scenario, telling a little story about some folks, and you know, cranking up Metallica. I mean, what brought that on?
I can't tell you. I mean, I co-wrote that song, like most of the songs on the record, with my friend Kurt, and I don't remember where we entered. You know, I don't know. I don't remember if it was a title, but you know, I have a sort of I call it an office, but it's really just like a shoebox size space with a door and a guitar and like a Ford Econoline bench, and it's my office where I write, and so it's right there in the heart of the Tenderloin, you know, and
Right.
It's all around us, but there's a little bit of me in there too, you know. There's
And
a
then,
little bit of the best of, you know, my own sort of looking back. If you give something enough distance and enough time, I mean, you can romanticize pretty much anything. You know, there was that time I got my ass kicked, man.
right, yeah, right.
It was great. You know,
those were the days.
a fight broke out. You know, so I feel like there's a little bit of me in there too with Willie and
Yeah.
Nilly.
I mean, there is a bit of romanticizing and nostalgia throughout, runs through the feel of the lyrics. Would you agree to that?
Yeah, I mean, we make our choices, you know. I mean, we make our choices, and who are we to judge? You know, maybe Willie and Nilly know something.
Yeah. One guy knew something. Who knows what? Is Nixon land takes a bit of a darker turn on the record, and I'm wondering what prompted you to think about him these days.
Well, I talk about Nixon a lot in real life because when I was growing up in a small town in California called La Habra, it was the home of Richard Nixon's first law office, and so. I mean, even like as a 7-year-old, I was aware that he was from, you know, that he was our guy.
Yeah.
And so, you know, he was famous, and I thought that was cool, you know. But there were definitely times throughout my life where I crossed paths with Nixon one way or another. So he was kind of in the air when I was growing up. I grew up in a very conservative family. I grew up, you know, my dad was certainly a fiscal Republican. I mean, I don't know.
Right.
God, I don't know what he'd think of what was going on today.
Well, that's the question, isn't it? Because to say your father was a conservative back in the '60s is a different thing than what it means to people today.
Yeah, I mean, he used to joke. You know, he was a bit of a joker. I can remember being a kid and driving somewhere with him, and there was something on the radio about unions striking, and I said to my dad, you know, Dad, what's a union? And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, son, they're bad news." Yeah, I mean, I don't really believe that he meant that, but you know, he had a lot of fun with it. So I don't know what he would think about it. But yeah, I mean, obviously Nixon was, you know, well, he was an interesting guy. I mean, he gave us Hunter S. Thompson. Where would Hunter
Well,
S.
there you
Thompson?
go.
He
I
was
remember
kind of
reading those things in Rolling Stone, man. It
yeah,
was
I mean, he was his muse, you know.
yeah, yeah.
So it's based on a true story. I mean, I really did go to on a field trip with my fourth grade class, and the teacher said, "Look around, children. You are standing in the site of at one time was Richard Nixon's first law office." And
Right.
so I think about that now, and I think, so those are hard-earned tax dollars, hard at work,
There
right?
you go.
But it happened, you know. I even after the song came out and I started doing interviews, I looked it up, you know, and that building's there, and there's a plaque, and I
Right.
guess the building came down in the '90s, but they took some of the bricks and they made a little memorial. So I didn't dream that up, and then
Okay.
uh, and we also my family and I also used to go to San Clemente Beach, and we would camp there, and I would go surfing, and
Yeah.
my older sister and I walked by the mansion one time, and like a Secret Service guy stopped us, you know, in the sand and said, "You can't go any further." And it was like a moonlit night, and I remember that really well. I remember thinking,
Right.
"Oh, that's,"
Right.
I remember asking the guy, "Well, do you ever see him?" And he pointed up to a little room, and he said, "Sometimes he's there in the reading room, you know, his
Right.
little library." So I thought that was cool.
And then staying on a similar topic on Get Off the Stage, which closes out the album, uh, I got to assume that this takes a more modern look at presidency and what's going on these days. Is that who it's addressed to?
Yeah, it's definitely contemporary. I don't ever mention anybody's name, but you know, I found with crazy people and narcissists, you gotta, you know, you gotta be polite and you gotta be reasonable. And if you could just get them to come down off the stage, you know, you don't want to raise your voice, you know.
Right.
So I'm hoping that'll help. And I played that in some red states, and I had some people walk out, and that, you know, I gotta say that was kind of a thrill.
Good on you. Well, I love the line about John Prine. Did you write that before he passed away?
Yeah, well in advance. I mean, we just thought about all the things that Trump could be doing. You know, we see maybe he could visit a Renaissance fair.
Right.
Maybe he could listen to some John Prine.
That,
You know, the poor guy's been over his head for so long. He's so far in over his head. You just, you know, wish he would just cry uncle, you know.
Yep. 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 Now I got to say, and I don't know how you feel about this, but one of the people in my mind that I kept coming back to when listening to this album was Tom Petty, and I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing as far as you're concerned, but I definitely felt like, you know, his spirit was in there somewhere.
Well, I sure, you know, I mean, I didn't grow up in the era of the Beatles, you know.
Right.
I kind of grew up in the era of Tom Petty, and also because I grew up in San Francisco, Petty was embraced early on.
Right.
You know, even I mean, I have older friends that saw him in the clubs and stuff, you know.
Yeah.
So he's always been there. It's always been in the air, you know, from the first record forward, and he's sort of like my Beatle in a way, you know.
Really? Okay.
I mean, I get compared to him a lot. I think a lot of it is, you know, probably my parents or just the sound of my voice. He had that big homely voice, and
Yeah.
but he never really betrayed his values, you know, like what the rock and roll that he grew up believing in, and he spoke so eloquently about Elvis, and I think the thing that really blows my mind about Petty, that I don't know if people talk about, is that for a guy that didn't have a sister, he really could write characters that were sympathetic to women. You know, I mean,
Right.
the girl standing on the balcony looking into the sunset, thinking there must be something better out there somewhere. You know,
Right.
and that's American Girl. I mean, that's on the first record. You know,
Exactly.
it's not like he got around on the third record. You know, I mean, So there was something about him that was divine. I mean, he had some gift and some deeper understanding of that stuff, but yet it was rock and roll. And it was never hard to listen to.
Right, that's a fact.
Yeah. So I mean, I have a lot of feelings for Tom Petty, and
Right.
yeah, he's going to be hard to replace. So I don't mind the comparison at all.
That's good. And you mentioned Green on Red, and I kind of looked at the Green on Red website. They seem to be a somewhat going concern. What is the status of the band?
Well, we kind of broke up. We broke up many times throughout the years.
Right.
The original lineup probably broke up in '87 or something, and then
Right.
and then Danny and I, the singer, and then really the leader of the group, we carried on with another record deal, and I don't know, squeezed out 3 or 4 more albums and world tours, and I think maybe we called it maybe in about '93.
Yeah, I think so. Yep.
And in about 2006, there was a celebration of the 50th anniversary of a club in Tucson, Arizona, and they decided that they wanted to get Green on Red to play, and lo and behold, the guy called each person individually and said, "I already talked to the other guys," and they said yes.
Right.
Which was a pretty good bluff, but in the end, we got there, and I think we were all surprised how well we played, and I think we were surprised how much we enjoyed it. So we went out and played more gigs in about 2006, and then it wasn't too long before people started bristling at the sight of other people's emails in their inbox. Oh Jesus, now what? So then it kind of it went away, So God knows if it'll ever come back, but never say never.
But you guys were kind of part of that scene. And it seems to be a topic of nostalgia. I mean, I'm reading things about the Bangles back in the day, and a lot of other bands that were around at that time. Did it feel like you were part of something when you were doing that?
Absolutely. There was a kind of movement of bands that embraced 60s music and stuff, and that was kind of different at the time. I mean, in Los Angeles you had the Blasters, you had X and stuff, and so the 60s were a little bit still not quite cold in their grave,
Yeah.
And there were other bands, like the 3 O'Clock. I remember vividly being like 18 years old and somebody telling me, oh, they saw this band, the 3 O'Clock, and at the end of the show, as all the punk rockers were filing out, the singer was standing at the bottom of the stairs handing a flower to each person as they filed out, as they filed out into the San Francisco night. And I have to tell you, in 1983 or 4 or whenever that was unexpected, and people weren't doing the unexpected at that time.
Right, that was fairly radical, I must say.
Yeah, hardcore was really kind of gotten boring, and there was a real uniform to it. They chased the women away. Going to see, who's that band out of DC that everybody loves so much? It was like a sporting event.
Bad Brains?
Yeah. They're like, oh yeah, these guys that jump around and they play fusion on guitar and then they do somersaults and I think, of course the Bad Brains were great, but
right.
Like I say, it became kind of a sporting event, and I definitely didn't get into music to revisit sports,
Yeah.
But these bands, the 3 O'Clock and the Rain Parade and
Dream Syndicate.
I was just hearing about them. Oh, the Dream Syndicate, they're named after a Velvet Underground or some Andy Warhol connection, and some of those bands, quite frankly, look better on paper. But it was a movement, and together the bands got attention, because because your magazine editors and your newspaper editors said, well, I never heard of any of these bands, but if it's about a scene, we can write about that. And there were all these Paisley Underground articles.
Yeah.
And pretty soon you got, Prince doing his Paisley best to get in on the action. And then, Tom Petty did the Alice in Wonderland thing. And so you could say that it penetrated pop culture,
Sure.
And in the end, really the best band was probably the Bangles. I mean, they did more to penetrate pop culture than anybody,
Yeah.
So
Pretty cool.
So yeah,
They were good live too. I saw them a few times.
yeah, it was a great time.
Yeah. So now that you got the land that time forgot out and about, and I assume you're still kind of in lockdown mode there and kind of isolated. What's your plan? What are you up to?
I tell you, man. I mean, I think when we get through this thing, on the other side, you're gonna find a real creative explosion.
I think so. Yeah.
But it's not gonna be from me.
No, come on.
I mean, there's just so much to observe these days.
Right.
I mean, today was a busy day. I knocked out an email interview for a Spanish magazine, but most days I'm staring out the window,
Right.
reading the New York Times, and there's just a lot to take in, to be honest.
That's a fact. I can't imagine what it must be like to be over there in San Francisco with all, the election going on and the fires, and that's probably a little south of you guys, but
Well,
still.
yeah, but it's very real. I mean, it's affecting my family, and it's affecting everybody in California. It's affecting the air quality.
Yeah.
And it just gets worse every year,
Yeah. Well,
I mean,
hopefully it'll get better.
Australia had a bad time of it as well. I mean, unbelievable. Yep. The destruction was unbelievable.
Yep.
And people just they're just, they get up, they dust themselves off, and they're like, on to the next disaster,
Onward. Yeah.
So I worry about that,
Yeah. Well, thank you for taking time to talk to me. I really appreciate it with all that stuff going on in wherever you are. It's pretty mellow here in Auckland. So.
Well, you guys did a great job with COVID, and you're kind of the poster children for around the world. Well, New Zealand did it. I mean, this country is
I know.
We're at a low ebb,
Yeah, well, it can only go up, hopefully.
Yeah, I hope so. Well,
November's around the corner.
Well, I want to thank you for inviting me on your show, and it's
my pleasure.
Nice to get attention. Musicians, we love attention, so don't worry about it.
It's been great for me. All I do all day long is talk to guys like you. It's fantastic. I can't think of a better way to spend my day.
All right. Well, keep smiling. I'll catch you next time.
Okay. Thank you. See ya.